I'm David Ainsworth, Head of Communications for the United Nations Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. We're here at the Geneva meetings, and today I want to talk about resource mobilization, finding the money to make sure we implement the Global Biodiversity Framework. So since the beginning of the meetings here in Geneva, delegates have been discussing this question of resources. How much money do we raise to support the activities to protect biodiversity? Why do we need this money? Well, if we're establishing protected areas, it costs money. If we're going to be working on organizing agricultural ways that are sustainable, it costs money. If we're going to help cities organize themselves in a way so that they protect biodiversity, it costs money. So currently, governments aren't giving very much. Over the last 10 years, governments did raise more money and increased substantially the amount of cash that they put at their levels for biodiversity work. But not enough. That was determined that the amounts have to rise. The figures that people started to talk about has said, you know, we need to raise about $700 billion a year to make sure that we make the different goals and targets. So $700 billion is a lot of money. They figure that that should come in two different sort of slices. The first one is, say, $200 billion a year. And that's where we just need to raise more money. We need to make sure that the development assistance that people give, developed countries to developing, is raised substantially. We have to make sure that banks like the World Bank, other development banks, also raise the money. And we also have to make sure that every country takes its given budgets and increases by probably a certain percentage of global domestic product every year their amount of money. That has to come up to $200 billion a year. The other substantial part, there's a $500 billion there, the hope is that that can come from reforming subsidies. Now, subsidies are the things governments give to make sure that some things are less expensive. For example, governments spend a lot of money making sure that the gas you pump in your cars or the oil you use to heat your houses or the gas is a lot cheaper. That's an example of a subsidy. That's also an example of a subsidy that's harmful to the environment. You give people money so that they behave in an unfriendly way. Currently, governments spend trillions of dollars doing subsidizing agricultural practices that reduce the soils, subsidizing cutting down forests, subsidizing overfishing, and these subsidies for fossil fuels. So the proposal that's here is to say, let's take $500 billion of that and let's redirect it. Let's subsidize farming practices that are sustainable and regenerative. Let's take money and look towards sustainable forest practices. Let's find ways to change fisheries so that fisher folk are harvesting in a sustainable way. Those figures are under debate, though. Governments are thinking, do we need $700 billion? Do we need to do it faster? Do we need to do it more slowly? How does that work? And these figures are linked to targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So Target 18 and Target 19, for those of you who might be looking at these targets, those are the ones that relate to these figures. The other thing to say is there is the discussion of maybe creating a special Global Biodiversity Fund that may provide global assistance for all of this. That's in brackets. It's being proposed. Part of the question is if they establish it, what does it mean for the Global Environment Facility, which is part of the existing funds? Who would manage this? What would be the purposes of it? So, those are the discussions underway. It's so intense right now that we really suspect that the governments will need to talk about this again after our meetings here in Geneva and then continue on the road to Kunming. So, I encourage all of you to continue to follow our discussions on resource mobilization and find out if that $700 billion figure is what stays. I'm David Ainsworth. Let's see you later on.